because you don't know what they're going to do.
Exactly. They're the biggest enigma, so to speak.
Okay. Hey, everyone. I'm Deshawn Peterson, and welcome to FPA NexGen Gathering Live 2024. And we are introduce our producer, but I want to just kick it over to you, Riley, and let people know who you are, the man behind the camera.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much. So my name is Riley Saunders. I'm a producer for the Blueprint and FPA NexGen podcast. I'm a financial advisor in the DC metropolitan area and a second-generation financial planner. So I'm just happy to be here.
We're happy that you're here. So one of the themes on NexGen is just recognizing that everyone's career path or journey into the space is different. So for you, Riley, you are a second-gen advisor. Could you tell us, what does that mean for you?
Being a second-generation financial planner is very important to me because I feel that my dad being a CFP and a planner growing up, he instilled in me a lot of the core values about just personal finance at a young age. So the story I always tell people is that I can remember my first memory around a personal finance lesson. It was interest rates. Basically, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And that really made my sister mad because the next time she asked for $10, I asked for $11 back.
Yeah.
So, I was basically being taught these concepts at a young age and really getting exposure to it before any formal schooling, which was nice.
And just to double down on that, since you say your dad was a CFP and you're second generation, what were some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from your father directly, as a father, but also in the career? What does that mean to you?
Sure. So I think the biggest lesson that my dad instilled upon me in both life and in business is really the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. And he's a fiduciary, I'm a fiduciary, so by default we sit on the same side of the table as the clients, and we want to do what's in their best interest. And I firmly believe that if you do what's best for the client, everything else will really fall into its place. So you need to start there.
And let's go beyond your father, right? So outside of the financial planning industry and just that direct exposure, who would you say, whether it's a mentor or just a strong figure in your life, who do you think has had the most impact on you?
Sure. So the most impact on me, a lot of my mentors are in the financial planning industry. So, Dr. Ruth Linton, shout out Virginia Tech, Dr. Megan McCoy, shout out Kansas State University. Those are some of my biggest mentors. Sarah Mauser, who's the director of financial planning at my firm. Those are some of my biggest mentors. But outside of financial planning, the biggest influence upon me is actually Pharrell Williams. He said a quote. I grew up in the Tidewater, Virginia area, so people like Allen Iverson, Pharrell Williams, Timbaland, I really try to rock with them. That 757, that's my area code. So I like what Pharrell does, and I think he tries to do well by people. I don't think he makes things for himself. I think he's very driven to help others. So the biggest quote from Pharrell that I carry into my day-to-day life when I go to work every single day is a quote. And Pharrell said, I don't want to botch this, but Pharrell said, make something undeniable
and make
it
equally as infectious.
Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it because you want to look cool? Is it because you want to make money? Is it because you want to have the suit and the car and the big house? Because all that will fade. When your work becomes purpose-oriented, it's going to be just as cool as the flashy things, but it's going to have a lot more value, and that's going to be able to drive you further into the next chapter.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really resonates with me.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Riley.
Thank you, Deshawn.
We'll catch you in the next one later.
And I'm here with Chris Wise of Wise Capital Partners. Wise up.
Wise up.
So, Chris, my mission today is really to try to capture a lot of different people that are all second generation, either CFPs or financial planners, and trying to understand how their walk of life influenced who they are today.
Yeah.
So with that said, your dad is a CFP, financial planner. How did your dad's career shape your own aspirations and career choices? Did he actively try to get you to join his firm or the industry as a whole?
I mean, I think his biggest goal was for me to take over, but I actually didn't want to because I didn't want to be my father, and that was kind of like a little bit of an ego thing.
Right.
But then once I realized like what my dad actually did, and it's about dealing with people, and I love people. Like that's my favorite thing, talking about their emotions, like, empathy. And I feel like I have really high emotional intelligence. I was like, because at first I was like, that's a lot of math. But then he's like,
Right.
Chris, it's not as much of investments as you think.
Right.
It's really dealing with the people. And then it actually
The soft side.
The soft side. I actually worked for him for a couple years, and I was like, dude, this is boring. And I just think I wasn't mature enough yet.
Right.
Had to go do my own thing, did my thing, and then I realized I was like, and then just clicked. I was like, I get it now, Dad. And then I called him. I was like, hey, I'm ready to come home now, man. I totally understand what you actually are really doing. You make an impact on people's lives every day. It's not about you trading. It's not about, your tax plan. It's about that you're making an impact. And that's like what I want to do. And I know my why is challenging. I always challenge everything. And there's nothing more challenging than like what we do because each person's totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I find that with financial planning, you can make the case for both sides of an argument pretty well. So finding that kind of anchor point as to why you're sitting on one side of the fence is important. What was your first memory about personal finance? Did you have any specific?
I do. Yeah. Well, first off, I was my dad's first wholesaler. So my dad did one of his niches is the 403B business, but
nice.
he didn't do K through 12. He did professors.
Right.
But of course, all my teachers in elementary school were doing 403Bs. So my dad actually gave me a pamphlet, and I have the same one still at the office. It was like a credential, and I was like, hey, Ms. Marvin, look how much my dad can make you money. If you invest at 7%, you'll have this in 20 years and you can retire. Wow. So I was already trying to get clients for Dad. But my real example of like understanding personal finance was when I started my first business, Wise House and Pet Service. As you can tell, I wise everything.
Wow.
That's the brand.
Wise
right?
up.
Wise up. For real. And like, so I was like, it's like the Home Alone era, right? So I would turn people's lights on, I'd feed their cats, and they didn't put timers because, people get, were getting robbed because like the timing thing. So like I was always early or I was late. So I was never like on time at like 7. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they were paying me. And one day Dad is like, hey man, you give me that $50 and I'm 8 years old. I'll put it in the market. And I was like, what's the market? And he said, watch, this is how your money grows. And if you put in $50 and you keep putting $50 in, it'll grow this. How about this? I'll match you. Oh, yeah, it's so. And he's like, now it's 100. I was like, I like that. He's like,
I like that.
I'm going to give you this toy because I know you need that short-term satisfaction.
Yeah,
but
now the start, put the rest in.
Yep. And so I started doing that, and then that's when I did my whole wholesaling because then I was like, hey, this is how you make money because Dad taught me. So I kept putting money away. As an 8, 9, 10, I just kept running that business, and it grew to a nice little amount. You know what I mean? And so that was like my first thing, and like I always tell that story to teach them when they're young, because he taught me, and I'm very fortunate. And you have a father that's in the business, and like we kind of have a leg up. But now with technology, I feel like it's way more open to learn.
Sure.
I mean, Dad was big on that. He was just like, look, this is how your money grows over time for you, and then I was hooked.
8 years old, start them young.
8 years old. Man, I would start him even younger, but I was really ADHD, so I was like all over the place. So I was just like, oh,
that's like a core memory.
It's very core.
My next question. So, family financial socialization theory, effectively, to sum it up in short, basically we learn a lot about our finances through our family.
Yep.
And that can be both purposeful. So, for example, explicit lessons that they're trying to teach you or bestow upon you. And then there could be passive or almost like subconscious lessons, whether that's, you notice your parents talking about a subject around money, or just maybe your dad didn't like talking about finance. I mean, obviously that may not be the case for him, but maybe be a little bit more sheltered around that.
Right.
Do you have any outliers, whether purposeful or passive, that I felt like parents?
I'll just I'm not saying I'll dog my dad, but I'll call him out. I've called him out on stage so many times. Like, he just looks and just laughs at me because we're just honest people. But like, dad didn't teach mom how to do anything. He's like, I got it.
Right.
I'm the CFP. And so like right now, like now that dad's getting older, I was like, hey, mom, like, what if something happens to dad? We're having those estate questions, right? And she's like, you need a budget, because she likes to spend money.
Right.
That's why dad never takes anything out of retirement. Yeah, like my dad literally doesn't take anything out of his retirement. He's like, your mom is expensive, son. I was like, yeah, I got you. I know her too, man. And I tell her, I'm like, mom, let's start creating like a budget, right? Like a simple. She's like, why? Like, now I have you. So if dad's gone, you're up.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that was one of the things why I think it's very important now, where I want to make sure both significant others are on the same page,
right?
Because she doesn't understand any of that stuff, and like, I don't harp that on dad. It's just like the way that the boomers were, like, hey, your father's taking care of this, I take care of this,
right?
When I think a lot of times especially finances, needs to be spread out. But there's also that control factor, right? Because it's like dad has the control over the finances, and that can get toxic.
Sure.
We talked about
almost gatekeeping,
right? And like, that starts arguments, and then then I become the referee, which sucks, because I'm like, oh my god, you're a child, but money is it's very emotional.
No, it is.
So overall, I would say that. But like, dude, my dad was always great at budgeting, always doing a good thing. But I think the biggest thing that it taught me that it can be emotional,
right?
Even for people that are in the business, because sometimes the cobbler has the worst shoes,
right?
And dad, there's a difference between me and dad, and he put the clients first sometimes before the family, and I will not do that.
I know.
Should I get the beat?
Trust me, I get that.
I said, that's very fadouche of you, dad, because you just ruined this vacation, because you should not be talking to a client. But he's a sole practitioner. He
has to.
Yeah, so like me,
if someone needs money, I mean, the next day, that they need money the next day. That's
which
your
is
job.
why I'm trying to grow the team. Like, right now, like, the team's taking care of it, but like, I learned from him, and like, that's the thing. Dad went through the ringers so that I could understand. I always like to say, dad built the launch pad, and I'm building the rocket.
That's awesome.
So
that's
amazing. And he built it with a dull axe, cutting down trees, man, just swinging away.
The slow start's better than no start.
Right.
So, my last question for you, just kind of outside of the financial planning realm.
Yeah.
Just, remove your dad, remove professors, remove anyone that's in the industry. In your day-to-day work, when you come to work every single day, who is your biggest influence? Who do you try to kind of emulate, so to speak, in your career, even though they may not be a one-for-one match?
Oh, I think Josh Brown and Ritz Holtz. I've loved Josh. I've loved Josh since I was in college. So when my friends were watching.
But even Josh is in finance.
He is in finance. But I guess to him, it's like, because he's also like a CEO. So like, yes, he's in finance, but he's also the
business
CEO,
owner.
because he's also both.
Yeah.
And so like, I try to emulate people that are both CEO and, I'm sure he's an advisor for, big clients. But it's like, I want to, emulate what they're doing. They do future-proof.
Yeah,
like
future-proof looks so sweet. I know you win last year, right?
I did, yeah. It's a great time. It's like the Coachella for finance.
Okay, I like that. I like that.
But like, I look up to him, but like, my biggest influence was definitely my parents, and it has nothing to do with the finance talk. It's
just the core values.
Like, dad was just very positive growing up, like always looking at the bright side. Mom was more like very realistic. More salesy, not as trusting as my father. So it was a good balance, because, things happen in life. And
the yin and yang.
Yes. Overall them. And, I guess like there's other business owners and, other people out there, but like those are kind of big influences. But like my biggest influence, to be honest, is like, it's kind of like the Matt McConaughey, like who I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Be at 45.
Yeah.
Right. Because I talk about it with my emotional health coach. And he said, who's your ideal person? And it's you that's the ideal person. So that's kind of who I'm trying to
You
get
in
to.
10 years?
Yeah, who am I in
Yeah.
10 years? And like, I work on it almost every day, like the better version of myself. You know, we all make mistakes, but it's just like, you know, maybe don't dwell on it because it looks like the dwelling isn't working. So why don't you try a different strategy?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, not to be nerdy, but I always look back at that Michael Caine quote from Batman.
Yep.
And it's, why do we fall, Mr. Wayne? To get back up.
That's right.
So
You got to have grit in this business, man, because you're going to get your ass kicked. I don't know if I can say ass, but I just
that's okay. That's okay.
Y'all can beat me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. This has been The Blueprint, an FPA NexGen podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Wise up.
Wise up. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Riley Saunders. I am a content creator here for FPA NexGen, and I am interviewing second-generation financial planners here at the FPA NexGen Gathering conference. To my left is Eliana Carrier of Carrier Wealth Management. Eliana, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
When it comes to your wardrobe and you're traveling to conferences, because we were talking earlier and you were talking about going to different conferences, do you play to your audience at all with what you're wearing? So like, for example, yesterday you kind of had the baggy suit with the nice sneakers.
Right.
And you know, that's a great outfit, but that's very progressive, I would say. And I'm curious if you may go to conferences with older financial planners and kind of reconsider what you're wearing, or you just, what's your thought process there?
I keep it authentic. I keep it my style. So no, I do not change what I'm wearing depending on the audience.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have any kind of tips for people, maybe young financial planners that are trying to, you know, find their voice in what they wear? Because the way I look at it and the way I kind of go about it is that the choice in my clothes represents kind of my almost attitude for the day. So, but when you're first starting to try to do something that's a little bit outside of the box, say sneakers with a suit, they may be afraid that they fall short or may be judged or maybe this, that, or the other. So do you have any tips for young financial planners that also have a affinity for the fashion world or may want to have an affinity for the fashion world and kind of, you know, want to explore what they can wear but may feel self-conscious?
Of course. So I would say, as I said earlier, just keep it authentic, keep it your style. Your outfit is a part of your first impression. I also have the hair going for me as well. But I would say I was at a conference with older advisors, and it was a good conversation starter. I had a lot of advisors saying, love your sneakers, wish I had those on. And so they really appreciate it. And I was still professional. I was still in a suit. And I felt more comfortable. I felt myself. I didn't feel like I was playing a role of, you know, someone that I was not. So I would say just keep it authentic, you know, keep it within obviously the dress code, but, you know, just be yourself and people will appreciate that. And they want to talk to younger advisors, the older advisors, and they want to get your feedback. They want to see how things are going. So I wouldn't shy away from that.
Okay. I know this is a financial planning podcast, so we'll get to those questions, but I just have one last quick question. You're a second generation financial planner. You go to these conferences with your dad.
Yes.
Is there ever a moment where your dad's like, sneakers with a suit? Or is he kind of like your biggest champion, rock star, like, let's go? Do you have like kind of like a push-pull relationship there?
So my dad is hilarious. He's a jokester. So he has made comments. He's made comments on my hair. He's like, did you do your hair this morning? I'm like, yes, I did my hair this morning. But he loves that I am authentic. That's how he raised me. So he is, you know, one of my biggest supporters, but he'll throw in those little comments there every now and then. And then he always takes credit for the compliments people give me as well. So if somebody's like, I like your outfit, he's like, thanks, I raised her.
That's so funny. That's so funny. I can really resonate with the just being yourself, being your authentic self. There's only one you, so do you well. So now to financial planning. When it comes to workplace dynamics as a second generation financial planner, how do you balance maintaining your own professional identity while working at the same firm as, say, your father?
Right. So my story is a bit interesting. My father's actually in Louisiana and I am in Florida. So we're not working in the same office. But what I did to differentiate myself was study for my CFP and get those marks behind my name, because my father is traditionally an investment advisor. So I felt like I wanted to bring something to his practice, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't feel like I was morphing into my dad. I felt like I was my own individual and adding to his practice.
That's amazing. So basically, you're kind of taking the best of what your father has foundationally made or kind of carved out for himself, kind of taking the best parts of that, and then adding your own flavor, maybe comprehensive financial planning, tax planning, insurance, education, etc., and trying to add value on top of kind of like the foundation that your dad has created.
Exactly. I do catch myself saying some of the phrases he says in the meetings sometimes, but
I think we all do it. I'm, if you know anything about me, I just regurgitate exactly what my advisor says. So I'm just like a robot, kind of just repeating word for word what he says. So I can totally relate to that. Kind of in the same vein, but a little bit different. Have you faced any difficulties or special considerations working with clients who are aware of the family connection? Do you get any pushback from clients, or is there anything that you kind of, how do you navigate that, so to speak?
Yeah. To answer your question, yes, I have gotten pushback. When our clients walk in the office, they see the baby pictures of me on the wall. They see the journey of my life and my brother's. So they're very aware that I am my father's daughter. My dad is a very proud dad. So they know all of my milestones. But I have had pushback in meetings, and you can see it. I've had clients verbally say, like, can you check with your dad? And I've also just read the body language of me saying something and then them looking at my dad like, is what she's saying correct? And I think that's fair. I'm 26. I started in the industry whenever I was 23. But what I did to overcome that was just prove myself, to present in those meetings. And I am very fortunate to have my father's support in presenting me as the expert. I have all of my CFP books in his office, so he always points right over there. He says, this is my CFP. This is the expert. She studied all these long hours, all of these books to get to where she is. And, we've had some conversations. I have had conversations with my father to say, maybe just let me present this, and then after you can say something. I would appreciate it if you maybe didn't interject whenever I'm talking, because maybe that would make the client think that I don't know what I'm talking about. He doesn't do it on purpose. It's just because he's like, a little ADD. So whenever something comes up, he'll say it. But we've tweaked some meetings like that, and I think that has made a huge impact. And the client that asked, can you check with your dad or whatnot, he actually came back and was like, wow, I remember when we first started working together, and I did have, some doubts about you running the plan, but you've really proved yourself, and you've made an impact on my life and my family's life. And essentially apologized for the doubt. And I was like, oh no, it's fine. I understand where you're coming from, and I wanted to prove myself to you. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity.
That's amazing. I think it's really important. What really resonated with me is that your dad, he is a financial planner, but kind of adopted more of an investment management focus. And, he doesn't have a CFP, which, does not mean this, that, or the other for financial planning. But instead of seeing you with the CFP and kind of just, saying great job, that's awesome, it sounds like he really leans into it. Like, look at this, look at what my daughter has learned and studied so long and hard for. I know those books. That's like 2 bookshelves.
Right.
Bookshelves. Of textbooks. I don't even know where mine are. There's like in storage somewhere because it's literally so much space. But no, that really resonated with me, and that's amazing that you have that relationship. So, One last question I'll ask, and this isn't really second generation planning related, but it's kind of just just something of interest that I like asking others is outside of prominent figures in the financial planning industry, so a la Michael Kitz's or Josh Brown of Ritholtz, who is your biggest influence, or what is your biggest influence in your day-to-day work? It could be a quote, it could be a message from any type of person or movie or book. Really what I'm trying to underline is who you are as a person, what do you enjoy, and how do you carry that into your profession?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I am a Star Wars fan.
Okay.
Wait,
real quickly, which one's your favorite movie?
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith, gang, let's go. That is... You are the chosen one, Anakin. I love that movie. Sometimes I pop up Disney Plus and just watch the last 10 minutes of that movie.
Yeah, so I think I was watching the Clone Wars throughout my CFP study. So for those of you who don't know, that's an animated series. But through that, I really found a connection with Ahsoka.
Ahsoka Tano, yeah.
Yes, she's a very fierce Jedi. And she went through adversity and, she actually left the Jedi Order, and that was very hard for her. And so just seeing her journey and seeing how she's grown, and now there's the live action movie that tells even more of her story, is something that I really resonate with. Being a female, being fierce, being authentically yourself is just something that, gave me comfort when watching those shows.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I never even considered that. And it's actually really rewarding. I don't know. Last thing we'll talk about Star Wars. I don't know if you watched, they finished it. Disney Plus had like a last season, and it kind of finishes her story. I think it left off with her leaving the Jedi Order, and then it comes back. Yeah, oh my gosh. And no, it's a really rewarding watch for anyone that has Disney Plus, like Star Wars. So anyway, Eliana, I really appreciate your time today. This is the Blueprint, an FPA NexGen podcast. We're here. I'm Riley Saunders, interviewing second-generation financial planners. Eliana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Riley Saunders. I'm at the second day of FPA NexGen's Gathering Conference. I'm here with Jason Kane of Kane Company Wealth Management. Jason is a second-generation CFP.
Yes, sir, yeah.
And we're just asking some questions about his approach to financial planning, given his history with having family in the business.
Yeah.
So, Jason, if you don't mind, I'll just jump right in. How do you balance maintaining your own professional identity while working at the same firm as your father?
Yeah, so I would say I've been working for my dad now for 3 years, and to differentiate myself, I got my CFP credentials just like he did to give me, kind of a leg up in the industry on, people want to really, go and be with a CFP, a certified financial planner, to do their financial plan and whatnot. But also in my local community in the Des Moines area, I'm part of the FPA of Iowa board. And so I lead our NexGen kind of segment in that area. So, I help all of our kind of NexGen advisors in the Des Moines local area. We go to monthly happy hours, or I guess they're quarterly right now, but just a way to differentiate myself and to connect with kind of the younger community, because my dad is a little bit older, so.
Do you find that your dad has any habits? It could be as simple as just, and not that there's anything wrong with this. I like dressing up, but, wearing a suit and tie every single day. Was there any sort of kind of last the Mohicans type deal where, he was the last one still standing with a suit and tie, and, maybe you get...
Yeah, he puts on a blazer for some kind of important type meetings that we have, and so he told me to go, buy a blazer or whatnot to wear for those types of meetings.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's always good to, look good, feel confident in this industry, and, just be comfortable with yourself and
right.
and all that.
Right. Look good, feel good, do good. That's what I always say. So, just moving forward, in what ways have you sought to kind of differentiate yourself from your dad? And that can be, investment philosophy. It can be your approach to financial planning. I know I've been talking to a lot of second-generation CFPs, and one reoccurring theme I seem to find is that our parents may have been more of a investment manager kind of position, really focusing on the investments, and really comprehensive financial planning has really, it's always been around, but it's really picked up pace and sprung to life in the last, couple decades. How do you try to differentiate yourself from your dad from just a professional or philosophy standpoint?
Yeah, so I would say my dad started his firm in 1990 and just kind of solely as a tax preparation service for people to do income tax preparation. And he, starting in 1999, he started offering financial planning services and wealth management services. And, to kind of differentiate myself to help him out on that journey is I started, after I graduated from college from the University of Kansas in 2016, instead of working, straight out of the gate from starting working for him, I started working for other companies down in Kansas City to kind of help me along, my track to kind of learn how other firms went about, kind of their business development and all that type of stuff. So
I really like that. I think it's important to kind of, however you do it, whether it's going to conferences, kind of just exploring different companies, just getting that different perspective.
Right. And I think it's all about perspective. There's so many firms out there and they all have a little bit of a different way of doing, everything.
A different spice of life.
So all while getting to the same goal of we're ultimately just trying to help all of our clients to the best of our ability and in their best interest. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Jason, I know you're busy, so I'll ask my last question. And I think this is a really good one for up-and-coming second-generation planners. What advice would you give to someone who is considering following their family into the financial planning profession?
Yeah, I would say consider, instead of just going to work for them right after school, maybe dabble into other companies just to see how they do things, their perspective, kind of like what we were just talking about. Like I said, I used to work for a large RIA, and I got to see kind of how they did things on a massive scale. And, they're kind of working like kind of a machine, having a bunch of processes in place and being able to, now that I'm working for my dad, bring that into his smaller firm. It's helping us, dividends in our space.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's great advice. I know my dad was sort of the same way. I don't work for my father, but when I first graduated college, I kind of sprung up and I was like, okay, I got my finance degree, financial planning track. Can I get a job at your company? And he was like, I would actually strongly prefer that you try to explore and try to, at least carve the beginning of your path on your own,
right,
and see where you go and see what you learn and what, ultimately you may be able to bring back to me. Now, long story short, I've worked for 2 different companies, and now I've landed at my second company, casting company. And the irony is that I love where I work. So
right.
I don't know if I'm going to be taking back lessons back to his firm, but
I think that's the biggest thing, is just finding where you fit and, finding where you most enjoy, what you're doing and serving your clients. I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think that's a great way to end it. Again, this is Riley Saunders with Jason Kane at FPA NexGen Gathering. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, likewise, Riley. Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Riley Saunders. This is day 2 of the FPA NexGen Gathering Conference. I'm here with Amanda Diaz of Advisory Services Financial. Amanda is a second-generation financial planner, so I just had to pull her to the side and ask her a couple questions about how that relationship has shaped her life. So, Amanda, just getting real quick into it, your mom is the financial planner of your family. How did your mom's career shape your own aspirations and career choices? Basically, did your mom actively encourage you to join the industry or even her firm?
Not at first. So I used to work for a different broker-dealer as an admin assistant. And I tried that for a couple of years, stayed longer than I should have. And that was when my mom encouraged me to come work for her, because she had been an admin assistant before, and she eventually worked her way up to the financial planning role. And so I didn't want to be a financial advisor at first. And then I saw how she worked, and she's very service oriented. She's really client relationship oriented. And that's what inspired me to become a financial planner myself.
The service part of it really resonated with me as well growing up, just, doing right by your client. So I can understand that. Step. How do you balance maintaining your own professional identity while working at the same firm as your mom?
So I've had to work a lot on boundaries. And so at work, when we talk about each other to other people, we try to, say Nancy or Amanda. So I still occasionally call make a mistake and call her mom, but that's okay. Most of our clients understand that that we're a mother-daughter duo working together.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you in what ways do you seek to kind of differentiate yourself from your mother, whether that's just philosophically or really professionally?
I really want to work with the younger clientele and make financial planning more accessible. My mom has not had as much luck with that, but I really want to go in that direction.
It's important to be able to make, because everyone thinks oh, I don't have $1 million and I can't access a financial advisor. And it's not as myopic as that. There's financial advisors of all over the spectrum that have different compensation structures that may work well for you. And I think trying to get those next generation clients, even if it's kids of clients, you can kind of create a sticky relationship and, have a familial feel to the whole family.
Yeah. And we have, I think for the most part, we have multiple generations. But I want to keep that up, but mainly concentrate on, I guess, the younger clients.
Sure. Okay, last question. So outside of prominent financial planning figures in the industry, so Michael Kitces, etc., who is your biggest influence in your day-to-day work?
I think most recently, I learned about her actually last week, Mariana Atencio. She's been on NBC and on Univision, which is the Spanish news channel. And I was really inspired by her message of embracing your authenticity. And I'm working to do that in my practice.
How are you embracing your authenticity at your practice?
I'm still working on it, but I am an introvert, and I'm embracing that I am a second generation Latina too.
Oh, wow. One step at a time. I can tell just by doing this, you're like many people kind of stepping outside that comfort zone. So I really appreciate your time today, Amanda. And thank you so much for answering our questions.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Landon Warmond of Reliant Financial Services. Landon is actually the FPA NexGen co-chair. So next year he will be president of FPA NexGen. And Landon is also a second-generation financial planner. So Landon, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
So Landon, real quickly, I just want to jump into things. Talking about the dynamics of being a second-generation financial planner, I know that it's just a different walk of life because the exposure is just so early. You're probably learning, maybe not advanced, but when you're 9 and learning about interest rates, that's pretty advanced if you ask me. So my question is, when working, how do you balance maintaining your own professional identity while working at the same firm as your parent? And remind me, it's your dad, right? That is.
Yeah, so it's my dad. It's very.
He's also a CFP, right?
He's not a CFP. Actually.
He's not.
No,
okay.
He's not. So,
not that means anything. That's neither here nor there. It's just we've had second-generation financial planners that are second-generation CFPs and just second-generation planners.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about his thought process. But again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, so in terms of trying to maintain my own identity, so the main thing that I really try to do is get it as involved as possible. Just because, I could stay at the firm and everything, and that'd be great. We can have a great time. But outside of that, first off, I needed to find exposure to how other people are doing business outside of our company. So one thing that I really did as soon as I pretty much graduated is I started getting involved, one with FPA as well as some other organizations, and then just overall being curious. I think it's so like weird that we're not as curious as we should be in this industry, and just simply asking questions. How does company structures work? How does compensation work? All these different things, and making sure that you're going around and networking with all these advisors. So the main thing with just, trying to build my own identity was getting out and networking with these other advisors, just so I felt like I had myself, and it wasn't just my dad wasn't just a cloud over me as a financial planner.
Sure, certainly. And just following up on that, when it comes to your involvement with FPA, what level of support has your dad given? I'm sure he's very proud of you having a leadership position and really trying to help the community as a whole, but was there ever any type of pushback, or maybe a thought that, hey, maybe if he's volunteering, he's not spending as much time on the firm? Not that that's here or there in terms of correctness, but just explain to us kind of the feedback you got from your dad when you were volunteering.
Yeah, so I guess to first start with just a little bit of clarity on just kind of the company structure. So the way it works at our company is we all specialize in working with school district employees and nonprofits, but we have about 5 to 6 advisors there, where technically we are all solo advisors. So how my father runs his practice can be completely separate from how I run my practice. And so I think early on, there was a little bit of pushback. I mean, you're going out, you're spending all this time networking with other advisors. Oh, well, why aren't you working on building your business? But I think there's different dynamics on how you can build your business. And one of those is creating really good tools and resources that are available to you outside of your company to make sure that you have those tools to succeed within the company. And so at first, I think there was maybe just a little bit of pushback, but overall, I think once he figured out how passionate I was about involvement and the resources that I was getting from other advisors, I think he really came around to the idea. I mean, after the first NexGen Gathering that I went to, this would be back in 2019, right after I graduated, I came home and I sat in a chair for about an hour, just trying to get all of the stuff out of my head onto a piece of paper. I mean, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, where you just learn so much impactful things and you're just putting it all onto the paper. And so I think he saw that and understood like where I'm coming from with my involvement and why I want to be involved to really just try to better my future.
No, that's wonderful. I'm glad that, it's healthy to have questions or pushback on underlying values, but I think what happens a lot for most people is that they volunteer, they get re-energized, they're more excited to come back because they see a perspective that is just outside the scope of the walls of which you work at. So I think that's very important. Really nice that you touched on that. My next question real quickly is, having your dad as a financial planner, that can be difficult sometimes, especially when working with clients. So have you faced any difficulties or special considerations working with clients who kind of are aware of the family connection? And if so, how did you address them?
Yeah. So I think it's first really important to understand that, like, as a G2 advisor, especially with just working with family, it's never going to be very clean cut. I mean, there's so many emotions that go into it outside of just like, it's not just a professional landscape. I mean, you're mixing business and family. And so there's always going to be a little bit of conflict there, even though it's mostly healthy conflict. So I think it's important to just kind of note that, like, in these kind of relationships, most of the time it's not very clean cut, and there is a lot of emotion that goes into this. As long as and that's okay, as long as you're having good constructive conversations about kind of what the future looks like and where you want to take things. Now, when it comes to clients and people knowing that my father is an advisor as well as myself, I have had one specific instance where it really stuck out to me and kind of like made me view myself as like a younger advisor. And, I felt like I had the confidence, but maybe they were viewing it potentially a little bit different. So like I put together this beautiful financial plan, and it was, top down, amazing. They're like, we've never seen someone present something to this extent to us before. This is amazing. And then so we started getting into talking about, investment recommendations. And my dad and I have completely different investment philosophies. Like most people coming into this industry now, like the way that you used to do things, it's a little bit different now. Now, one of the specific things that they said was, "Oh, I see that you have these investments lined up here. Is this what your dad does?" And one, I got a little retaliatory towards that question, and I said, "Actually, no. My dad and I do things completely different, and I think we have really different investment philosophies. And here's why this is my investment philosophy. But the best thing about this is that there's a gazillion different ways that you can get to your financial goals, not just that singular way. So making sure that the client understands that you are your individual person, and just because you're not doing the exact same things that your dad is doing, it's not a bad thing. So really just trying to make sure that you're confident in what you're saying and making sure that you're keeping really your own personal identity."
I love that. I was speaking with a G2 financial advisor earlier today, and he sort of mentioned the same thing. And to that, I really have to say, with financial planning, there are some objective truths, but a lot of the strategy can be subjective. You can kind of toe the line and pick a side, and both be accurate for different reasons. And it's just really important to find that anchor point that you resonate with, and just stick to your guns, so to speak. So I really enjoy you kind of letting us see behind the curtain there. So I'll keep this brief. I know you're extremely busy. So my last question for you is, what advice would you give to someone considering following their family into the financial planning profession?
Yeah, I would say my biggest piece of advice is just know going in, it's not going to be as straightforward as you think it is. But the important thing to remember is that if you're having open communication, that's going to take you a long way. My dad and I, we probably don't communicate the best in terms of, what I want in the future and kind of what he wants. But at the end of the day, things are said and constructive things come from that. But you need to make sure that you're having open communication, especially in a very complex family dynamic where you have a family member that you're working with. So really focusing in on that communication and understanding that, one, you're going to have your differences, and that's perfectly fine. But making sure that both of your voices are being heard and making sure that doesn't also impact your family life.
Wonderful. I think that's a great way to end it. Again, this is Landon Warman. He is the FPA NexGen co-chair. Landon, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Riley.
Hello, everyone. We're here. This is day 3 of FPA's NexGen Gathering, and I'm here with Allison Flournoy of Flournoy Wealth Management. Allison, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you guys probably know by this point, I'm here interviewing second-generation financial planners, and Allison is a second-generation CFP and has a really great story just about her background, her parents' story, and all that. So I'm really excited to really unpack that here today. So first and foremost, how did your parents' career shape your own aspirations and career choices? Basically, in essence, did you feel any pressure to join the industry from your mother?
No, I didn't feel pressure. My mom started the business 20 years ago, and she started the business, unfortunately, because my dad had passed away. So she was a single mom for 15 years and was really like, what am I going to do? I've got these kids. They've got volleyball and soccer. I have to support this family now. And a friend of hers said, you should get into financial planning, help women, other women go through what you've been through. So she got her CFP and she started building her business, became a financial advisor, and she has built this business. And to be completely honest, I never thought I would ever get into this type of industry. I didn't major in accounting. I didn't major in finance. And so I just thought I wasn't smart enough. I thought that was off the table because I didn't do that in college for my major. I was in advertising major. So it's like completely different. So it wasn't until after COVID, when all of her clients were very used to Zoom and they were totally okay with it. And a lot of them are moving to where their grandkids are. Like a lot of them aren't where she met them.
The Great Migration.
The Great Migration. So that was honestly the first time my mom ever came to me. We'd never talked about it, to be honest. And so it was the first time she ever came to me, and she's like, would you ever consider like coming into the business? Like, eventually it will be yours. And I was like, what an opportunity. That would be stupid to not take advantage of it. So 2021, I started studying. So that's, I wouldn't say pressure, but it was a surprise, I think. I was in tech software before for like 8 to 10 years before that. So
Yeah. I think you picked a good time to start studying. 2021 pandemic, people are still quarantining, staying inside, certainly tighter regulations and rules back then. So, an unfortunate event, no doubt, but beneficial for.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. The studying was
You had nowhere else to go. So what
stuck in my house.
Yeah.
I was stuck and I just studied every single day. And the other thing to kind of, we were talking about this before, but just it was a reality check too. It was very much seeing what my mom had done when I was like 12, 11. She's studying for the same CFP test. Like, I couldn't believe that she did the same thing that I did. And she had two, like, bratty preteens, like making fun of her. Like, she would bring her flashcards to my volleyball games, and I would be like, why are you studying? It was just such a brat. But
No, I can't. I'm just reflecting on when I took the CFP. I was a couple years removed from college, maybe one or two, and besides my full-time job, I didn't have any.
it's so hard. It's so hard.
It was still harsh.
It's so hard. So, like, I just couldn't believe my mom did that as a single mom,
Right.
like figuring out her life, like,
That's
So
amazing.
I had so much, I think, not like I had a bad attitude before by any means, but I definitely was like, it really made me respect her. Not that I didn't respect her, but
Of course.
it really like kind of raised that bar, because
I think it's like
I didn't believe that I was doing what she did. And I was like,
like a full. It's a full circle moment.
oh, so yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I guess real quickly, and if you can't get into specifics or anything, we totally understand. But you talked about how your mom proposed that one day. It sounded like she came to you with a mutual beneficial relationship. Of course, she's your mother, and like she's unconditional love and everything.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm kind of reading that as, hey, come under my wing. I'll show you the ropes and show you what a great profession this is.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, I can act as a fiduciary and have that succession plan so that when I ultimately need to retire, would like to retire, that I know that someone is taking care of my clients, and what better person than my.
I think trust was a big thing for my mom when she was thinking, she's starting to think about it. I don't think she'll ever quit. I think she's going to want to work until I tell her no. But so it's not that she's going to like leave the business anytime soon, but she's starting to think about it. She's like, what is she, like 68 years old? So she still loves her job, but as she's starting to think about it, she's like, who's going to, do I have to start like networking with other, advisors or younger advisors? And again, I wasn't in the business. So she's like, hey, what about Allison? And she was like, I trust her more than anyone. And all of her clients know who I am,
Right.
whether I know them,
Just through conversation.
right, or through conversation. Like that's one thing that my mom is like really good at, is like her relationships with her clients. So they all know who I am. They know I'm a good person. And my mom tells them that I trust her, and she's the one that I trust to kind of be the next generation of Florida Wealth Management. So I don't know if does that answer your question? I kind of.
No, you absolutely did. I mean, we were talking about just succession planning and how.
Yeah.
Really, I guess what I was trying to get at is it just kind of in the talking stages, or how do you even approach that type of subject? I would be so like
logistically, like all of like how we get paid, the taxes, we have an partnership LLC, like our LLC agreement, we are just figuring that out. And like she has 90%, I'm a 10% owner. So we're partners in it.
Oh, nice.
But so we're figuring that out because there's so many different ways. We actually went to our broker dealers conference and we're trying to get ideas from other people because this is like, you know, the first time we've done this, obviously. So we're trying to figure out like, how do people do that? Like, how do I buy my mom out? What are ways that people do that? Like, how do they get the money to do that? There's so many different ways that people are doing it. So we were getting a lot of ideas of how to actually do that. But I would say to answer your question, we are like still like learning right now. I mean, and it's my mom, so it's like, it's my mom at the end of the day. So it's like, it's not as like, I don't know, stressful.
Nothing
Like,
to- nothing to get-
He trusts.
Yeah, nothing to get tied up in. I don't know what the phrase is. Anxious over spoiled milk. I don't know.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
So we're figuring it out.
yeah, I find that most people are figuring out. Like I've actually not found maybe one person that's actually put pen to paper, and that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it's got to be a long drawn out period you can't just overnight come to a decision and
Yeah.
come to an agreement. I can't even fathom the terms of the agreement. You know, what is up there?
Yeah.
Like,
And
what-
she's not ready to go yet.
Sure.
She's not ready yet.
Sure.
So this could be like 10 years out. I'm fine with that. This is her business. She built it. Like, to be honest, I'm here to support her. I'm going to build up my clients, but like I'm supporting her.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different from some people. I mean, I guess a good thing, but I've heard a lot of people here when they join firms, it's like what are people saying? They eat what they catch. I've heard people say that like 10 times today, but
Eat what you kill.
eat what you kill. People say that a lot. And for me, I joined really to like help and support her, and then I built my own. So I guess I'm lucky.
Right. It's also helpful that you're still fresh to the industry. Of course, you have your CFP and your
Oh, I'm very, very fresh. Yeah.
so like
I'm
definitely a learning curve that I'm still getting adjusted to.
Yeah.
So I can understand that.
Yeah.
I know you got places to be, people to see, so I will keep this last question short and cognizant of your time. Outside of prominent figures in the financial planning industry, who is your biggest influence in your day-to-day work? It could be a quote, a musician, movies.
I would say people that have been really inspiring me recently have actually been like some of my closest like girlfriends, like my friends. I feel like it's like a stage I'm 34 years old, and I feel like a lot of my friends are at this stage where like, okay, they've all been in corporate America for a while, or they've done their job for so long, and a lot of them are going after their passions now, maybe because they feel financially secure now. You know, they're married with kids, or I don't know what the mentality is, but I'm seeing a lot of like my women friends like go after their dream. It's really cool. I have like 3 friends that are like starting their own businesses, and like it's just inspiring to watch. And they're really successful. Like they're really successful at it. It's almost like an expanding. I have this personal belief of expanders where you seek out people who are like, if you have a limiting belief, like, I'll never make enough money to be able to do that trip, or I'll never make enough money to have that house. That's like a limiting belief. And so you seek out expanders in your life that you're like, wait, they did it. They're right in front of me. And so it helps your like mind make connections of like, oh, that's totally possible for me too.
Right.
So it's cool that I see that with my friends. So
No,
that's my answer for that.
I love that. I think that what I really enjoyed about that answer is that it's two-pronged. You know, when you rise with your friends, you know, I always say to my friends, we ride together, we die together. You know what I'm saying? And that, and maybe not literally, but
Each other right.
yeah, we're here for each other and want to help each other succeed. So friendship's key. And I love that you get inspiration from that and energy from that. I also liked how effectively they're chasing their passion, and that, you know, they may have put in the time, so this, that, or the other, but because they put in the work, that enabled them to pursue something else or continue to succeed where they are.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Allison. So thank you again so much for taking the time to interview today. This has been the Blueprint and FPA NexGen podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.